Hey Ben.
Hey
So can
Ben.
you see? Can you see people, Ben? Can you see
Yeah,
everybody?
yeah.
Nice, beautiful, beautiful. Just wanted to give Ben a kind of like a welcome. Like, when somebody walks into a room, they realize, oh my gosh, this is an international convention of remarkable craftspeople.
Love it.
First of all, welcome. Thank you very much for doing this. I'm really excited to have you because your reputation precedes you. The things I've always heard about you is that you're a go-getter. Like, everybody I spoke to about you said, this guy's a real hustler. Like, he's just able to make things happen.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Thanks everyone for joining.
Give us the story from the beginning. How did you end up in music? What are the early origins of this? How you got into this business and all that. What was the beginning and how did it evolve?
My mom was an opera singer and music instructor. So I was sort of born and thrown into music. My earliest memories are her singing and playing piano downstairs, and I would come down and, you know, emulate her voice exercises, and I was just immersed in it from jump. My dad was a physician, or is a physician still, a semi-retired physician, but definitely different sides of the brain from both parents. But I loved music. I loved going to school in the mornings and hearing, top 40s pop from, Prince to, Michael Jackson to Beatles to Queen to Whitney Houston, to Toto, like everything. I was loving it all. And I had an older brother that played guitar. I started with the piano. He kind of introduced me to a lot of heavy metal music. And I went into a long sort of journey in heavy metal music. At a certain point, I was like, well, I love the piano. I enjoyed how the acrobatics of the fingers looked while you played piano. And I also love the sound. I love that the piano sounded like an entire orchestra. So that's why I started with the piano. But then once I got really immersed in heavy metal music, I wanted to play guitar. So immediately after a week of playing guitar, I started a band. My brother was also in a band. He was in a band called Incubus, or is in a band called Incubus. And they were playing in a rehearsal room, and me and a few other friends started playing. I had no idea how to play, but I never really learned other people's songs on guitar. I just started figuring out my own songs after playing for a week, and was in that band until we were about 22. And it was a band called Audio Event, and we signed to Atlantic Records, and got to journey the world, and got to go to Europe and North America, and we did okay. We sold like this was 2002. I think we sold like 150,000 records, which was
Oh,
a
all right.
success for us, but a complete failure for our record label that dumped, hundreds of thousands, if not over $1 million into promoting it. Um,
But by
but
indie standards, this is a
yeah,
very decent number, right?
yeah, it was cool. I mean, we were selling out like 500 seat to 1,000 seat venues where we were playing for the most part, and then we went to go make a second record. The band just internally imploded. When we started making music at first, everybody was just excited to make music. But
Yeah.
now on a sophomore record, everybody's like, I want music my way. I want to be this type of band. I want to be, and it just, the meeting of the minds conflicted, and then it just internally imploded. I started another project. So in Audio Event, I just played guitar and helped write a lot of the music and maybe a little bit of the melodies. After that, I jumped into another project where we signed to an imprint on Sony, after about a year of writing music. And I sang in that band. It was much left of center as opposed to my first band, Audio Event, which was really like alternative mainstream rock, kind of Foo Fighter-ish.
Yep.
Um, and this one was a bit more like the Pixies. And we went on the road. I was about 26 at the time, and it was just a whole new struggle. It was like rebuilding a whole new product, a new brand, a new band, playing in front of 4 people, then getting lucky to play in front of 500 if you get the opportunity. But I
Yeah.
just kept the hustle going. And then a friend of mine, while I was on the road, was like, "Hey, have you ever thought about writing music for ads?" And I was like, "That exists?" Like, as far as I was concerned in 2006, I was like, I figured every piece of music was either licensed or like a library piece of music that somebody used for a score, whatever. I just never envisioned somebody has a 30-second spot or a 15-second spot, and somebody just literally composes a track for that.
Yeah.
So I sent a music house. They're no longer around. They were called 10 Music, and they basically gave me a bunch of different spots to write to for free, and if I won, then they would pay me the award fee. But I think it was my second spot. It was a Thermacare spot, and I was on tour, and I was using GarageBand, and I didn't even have like the equipment to lay back anything, and I didn't even have a MIDI keyboard. I used the keypad on my laptop to score this kind of silly piano orchestral. I'm sure it sounds terrible. I don't even know where it is anymore, but it sold through, and I would have been happy if I would have gotten $50, as I told you earlier when we were talking. Yeah. But like it was a check for, I want to say like $6 or $7 grand. And to me, like I felt like a billionaire. I'm like, I'm so rich. I need to buy a house. I need to buy like so many things with this $6,000. And but ultimately it created a light bulb in my mind where I was like, this went off. I need to really start focusing on this because, I was 26. I was concerned about, I could be doing this on tour for the next 5 years and still not be where I want to be as far as like being self-sufficient. A few months later, our van's transmission broke and it was like a $5,000 repair. And I was just like, okay, I need to go focus most of my time now. I've gotten 2 runs at this. I didn't feel like it was happening for me, at least in this landscape. So yeah. I started devoting my time to advertising. I started writing for, 5 or 6 different companies, getting a demo fee, which helped pay the bills for every demo fee that I would compose demos for, and saw success that way.
But you said your friend introduced you, but then you started writing for 6 other music houses. How did you develop that? Like, how did you make that happen?
So one of my, through the company that I was working for, 10 Music, they had like an associate producer there that her husband was a freelance composer, and she introduced me to him, and he was working for, probably 20 different music houses at the time, and was, doing really well salary wise in terms of how much he was winning and, et cetera. And he just introduced me to a bunch of people. So I would call different music companies, and having him sort of broker the introduction made them pay attention to me. Okay. I think that's really important, having somebody, because if they vouch for you, that's huge. And that works for me too. Like even today, like if I know somebody that, for example, if you, or if Naren calls me, he's like, I have a friend that's a killer composer, I will definitely stop what I'm doing to listen to what he or she has to offer.
The power of referrals. Like I even say to people, don't wait to ask for a referral. Like do it right away. Like even if I have a coffee with someone and it's an epic conversation, I'm already asking for a referral.
Totally.
Hey, because we had a great chat. So maybe there's someone like you that you can introduce me to. So it's huge, guys. Like honestly, cold is hard and it's necessary. You got to do a bunch of that. But always look for a low-hanging fruit called referral.
Well, I have a funny story about that. As far as like, being extroverted, even if you feel somewhat introverted. When I was in a band, I was always the one that was sort of acting as the band manager, even though I wasn't titled band manager before we actually hired a manager. But I would go and book the shows. I would make relationships with the promoters. I would make relationships with FedEx Kinkos, where I get to go in there and my friends would let me do, copy flyers for free. You know what I mean? Like you navigate your way in what you want to do, and you find people to collaborate with. And what I've learned over the years is people are, more than happy to help you, especially if they like you and they see your passion. And that same thing happened. So the R&R who signed us to Atlantic Records, his assistant, she was very nice. And every time I would go in there, I guess I'd hear stories about different bands that were signed to the label. And they would tell me how certain bands would come in, with like a chip on their shoulder and ego, thinking that they're larger than life. And I never understood that, I just think it's ridiculous, so I would always go in and talk to everyone, because I enjoy talking to people. I like people. And so when I ultimately started a job, I started working for a company called South Music. I decided to go in-house because I thought that would be a way for me to sort of learn a bit more about the business and not just only freelance compose. And I took a meeting. A friend hooked me up with Warner Brothers Music, and they from their film department and television and promo department. And I walked in there, and this was, 6 or 7 years after I stopped touring with the band on Atlantic. And I walk in there, and sure enough, the person that's sort of in charge, the VP of music, was the assistant to my A&R.
Oh, wow.
And we see each other, and I'm like really nervous going into this meeting, like, holy shit, like, and I don't know much about, I'm new to this business. I'm like selling this company, talking about how we could, maybe we could work with you in film or in TV. And as soon as I see her, she's just like, Ben? And I'm like, Nikki? Like, and it was just this, it just took all the stress out of the scenario. And I got a job that day.
Wow. Wow.
So it just shows, like, never forget to be, always kind to people, especially, like whether you're on top or whether you're climbing up your own career ladder.
Yeah,
Always be lovely to people because, I never forget the people that weren't nice to me, put it that way.
yeah, absolutely. And you know what, man? I've come to realize how huge humility is combined with hard work.
Yeah.
This is what I truly respect in musicians now. And you can kind of smell it on certain musicians, like the lack of humility, because sometimes it shows as a lack of patience, or like I deserve this, or like I'm somehow special. It kind of comes across in their emails.
Yeah.
And it just never works. Like, you know what I mean? Like the people that we work with, like the finest composers in the game, they never say it themselves. They never brag. They never like boast. Never.
Yeah.
In fact, they're almost like there's always like an air of surprise. Like they're surprised themselves that they have made it,
Totally.
And I think that's the right attitude, because it allows you to, I think, survive in the long run. Like it's a healthy perspective. Otherwise, you just hurt yourself. Like, and I know I'm speaking from experience. Moments where I wasn't humble. I mean, it just results in lack of patience, and like you just expect that it should be easy, but it's never easy. But then, like, if you work hard, the universe throws you these beautiful balls for a home run. Like meeting your friend and getting your first job. Okay, so but tell me, like, how? Let's say that you didn't have friends that gave you opportunities. How did you communicate with people early on? And I'm basically trying to download some knowledge and wisdom from how you do things, how you contact people, how you develop relationships for the benefit of everybody listening.
Okay. So, I've had different artists and different, friends who have kids that have bands that have reached out, and they're like, what do you recommend doing? Do you recommend getting a manager? Do you recommend, getting a booking agent? I'm like, from my vantage point, I just feel like you do everything that you can to fulfill your passion. Make as many contacts as you can. Reach out to the people that are the gatekeepers and get to know them, cold call them. From what I did from early on is I mentioned before, like, just if there was a club I wanted to play, I would call the promoter. And if he didn't return my call, I would call him again. If he didn't return my call again, I would go down to the venue and knock on his door and want to meet him. Because, like, what am I going to do? Am I going to fail? If I fail, I just, it's sort of that inspiration, you fail until you succeed. And I've failed many times, but I keep getting up and pushing through, because ultimately I'm not going to succeed ever if I let, a gatekeeper stop me.
I'm very curious about this, though. Where does that mindset come from? Did this come from your house? I mean, you have a bunch of ambitious, aspirational people that you grew up with, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at your brother, your mom is an opera singer, your dad is a doctor, which means he went through medical school. You know what I'm saying? Is that something you got from your, like, is it something that you had to build on your own in a sense, and say yourself, I got to follow up, I got to get over that feeling that I'm being maybe annoying to somebody, or was it kind of natural for you?
I think there's a little bit of imposter syndrome all the time, where you're like, oh man, they're gonna find out, like, I'm not as good as I want to be, or is I have no right to be calling these people. Like, there's always that sort of insecurity of ultimately, which is failure, like being fearful of failure.
Yeah.
And I think, my mom grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and, very Midwestern, would talk to people everywhere. At the grocery store, would be talking to the cashiers about their life, like she just had the gift of gab. And my dad does as well. Certainly my mom is really alpha personality in that regard. So I think I was just used to being comfortable in a social scenario. And, but it was never really that comfortable for me to cold call people, but I would just fight through it. It always felt like, oh, I don't want to annoy this person. But, one thing I noticed is there was a composer that called me, and this is when I was at Massive, and he was just kind of checking in to see if there was any projects. And he called my phone, and I picked it up, and I think I was kind of in like a stressed out mood. And he's like, yo, what's up, Ben? Like he was like in this really great mood, and he elevated my mood.
Oh yeah.
So it's like,
okay.
So I was like, all right, I'm going to talk to him. Like I couldn't get off the phone with him because he was like in such a great mood that it felt weird for me to be like, I can't talk. I'm stressed out right now. Yeah. And he ended up keeping me on the phone for like 25 minutes. And then after that conversation, I was like, oh, I have a project. Like it just sort of, he navigated his way intentionally to talk to me. But like he was such a lovely person to talk to that I was like, I can't help but stay on the phone and talk to you. And I was like, that was a huge part of it. I think I would call and try to express my excitement for what I was doing and see if it could be a collaborative, marriage with whoever I was calling.
It's a transfer of feelings, really. Like the difference between like, this is what I'm trying to express to people. And I think I'm repeating myself now, but when you license music, it's about music. When you deal with a music library, it's about, is this song right or not? But when you deal with custom tailor, you go to a custom tailor who inspires you, who you like. And it's the same for us craftspeople. So much of it is not just the way we make music, but who we are and how we do things.
Totally.
Like I don't work with composers who are really, really good and they would knock the brief out of the park, but have a bad attitude sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I tend to also, and I'm trying to be better that way. I'm trying not to complain. I'm trying to be constructive. I'm trying to be grateful that I even get to do this after all these years, And so like any composer who contacts me and gives me good feelings, it's like a selfless thing. It's not like this kind of like passive aggressive, like, so, this kind of alluding to, like, I know why you're calling me, man. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah, I feel exactly the same. I think, it's sort of like gray-haired wisdom. The older I get, the more I don't want to allow stress and negativity into my life. And stuff I would tolerate, I'm going to be 43 this year. Stuff I would tolerate in my 30s or my 20s, I don't have room for that. Like I don't need to work with some genius that's going to make my life harder emotionally. I'm not interested in that,
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, tell me, you went to South. At South, were you a composer or like a producer? Composer.
So I was doing both. I was composing, focusing on producing, just being the mediator in between client and our agency and our music studio, and basically, understood budget, understood the different parts of the team, learned how the agency worked, because I was pretty much siloed when I was just freelance composing. I didn't really understand the inner workings of an advertising agency. So that was my crash course into how agencies operate. And what happened when we first, because they were a startup, basically, they had reps, and I don't know if you guys have those in Europe, but in the United States, you have reps that represent production companies, editorial companies, post companies, animation, etc. And these reps were like, well, we're going to make you an A-list company, and we're going to bring you so much work. And there was nothing happening. Like I started work for 3 weeks, it was just dead, not one job. So I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to start calling producers and creatives at advertising agencies. So I had Sourcey Creative, which was, like the Rolodex of all the creatives and producers. For the most part, it was like you had your email addresses, and then you had one phone number that would call the receptionist at the agency, and then they would link you to whoever you're trying to call. I would spend 4 hours a day at least calling multiple people all day long because I didn't know anybody. I didn't, other than like, you know, the few production companies, the music studios that I worked for, and a few composers, you know? So I would end up, some people would just randomly answer their phone, and I could tell that like they were like, oh, gosh, Ben calling again, like, but they would, you know, they'd humor me and they would talk to me, and then I would start learning about them and their life and, you know, their family, and we would just shoot the shit on the phone. Sometimes I would be on the phone with these people for 30 minutes. And before I knew it, like I just started having a Rolodex of people that are like, you know what, Ben, call me in 2 weeks. I'm gonna have a job. And some of the jobs were competitive, where we would compete against other music studios, and other jobs were just awarded. And that's kind of how.
But 4 hours of cold calling every day. I mean, this is like the mythical stories you hear about, like, you know, how someone's career got started. And I've heard this said before. Actually, my first mentor, like the guy who hired me into this business for the first time, he wasn't really a music guy. He was a really good business guy, though. He said to me, "You make 100 calls a day, you'll be fine. You'll be a success." And I was like, I realized like with years that he was absolutely right, and that a lot of people overthink it.
Yeah.
Just get on the phone, man. 4 hours a day. Something's going to happen after a few weeks, you know?
100%, man. Yeah. And I had one of those, like, I ended up like my head started hurt, my neck started hurting from having one of those phones. So I ended up getting like, you know, like a customer service.
Oh, no.
So that like I could, you know, I had a piece of paper on all the things that all the projects we were working on, because sometimes when people are like, "Oh, cool, you're working for this company. What are you working on?" And sometimes, you know, your brain just like goes blank. So I would have, you know, a database written just at the time on paper on like what tracks we've been working on, what spots we've been working on. Yeah. So like everything would roll off really quickly. And I'd notice in the morning, for the most part, 90% of the time, I'd be like, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And then once I dove into it, I was like, all right, let's go. Let's go. I'm not taking no, you know? Yeah. And I don't do that every day now. I mean, that stopped once I was able to sort of find like my collaborative people that like I resonated with. Yeah. I still reach out and I still do, you know, outreach and sales outreach, but you know, I ended up meeting, you know, hundreds of people that I could call and would know who I am, you know, and know the work that I've done. And that was really helpful in terms of bringing in projects to South when they started, and, you know, turning them into, you know, I think the first year we did like, you know, it wasn't $1 million, but, you know, it just progressively got, you know, more. And then that's when I met Massive Music. So when I met Scott.
The first thing I did in the damn morning was reach out to 50 people. Rain or shine. It was a non-negotiable thing. Whatever happened later in the day, because there were projects, they would be attended to. But this was like something that I didn't have to do, but I just did. 50 people a day. I promise you guys, just like Ben said, it's crazy uncomfortable before you do it. Just like going out for a run, just like going to the gym, there's all kinds of resistance. But the moment you start doing it, you actually get energy from it. And I promise you, if you do it first thing in the morning, you finish up by 11 a.m., you feel so good. You feel so good. The self-confidence you have, the energy, like, you know that you've put in ripples in the universe and that something's going to come back. You know it. You know what I mean? Because when you tear through like 50 calls, you know something's going to come back like a boomerang. It just has to.
Yeah. And, you know, and something that was really helpful too, because part of it feels a little contrived, you know, calling somebody and you're asking for business but that's not really the intention. And I've had a lot of people ask me, like, when you take clients to lunch, like, when do you ask about work? And I'm like, I'm not asking about work. I'm asking about how our minds can collaborate together. Like, this is a joint sort of mutual benefit to whoever I'm reaching out to. And that's where the sort of phoniness leaves the building, because my intentions aren't to just take something from you, you know? And like, I think people get that part wrong. You know, composers a lot of times will send me emails going, I worked on this, let's work together. I'm like, dude, how about like we get an appetizer? You know, what about, hi, like, I'm this person, I'm a composer. I'd love to talk to you. Do you have like 10 minutes of your time?
Exactly. Yeah.
Then tell me about all the stuff that you're doing. Like,
Yeah.
let me get to know you versus like you're selling immediately.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that sort of worked me through the uncomfortable feeling was I would write a script that I wouldn't really use, but I would write a script on what I would say and then try to come up with different things that I would think they would say to get rid of me. And then I would have different answers that I would have in my mind at first when I first started doing it, which was helpful because I didn't feel, as insecure if I didn't have some sort of backup plan. But like one of the things I would do when I would first get on the phone call, I would say something like, hi, my name is Ben Einziger. I work for so-and-so company. I haven't had the opportunity of working with you yet, but are you familiar with our company? And they would be like, oh, no, I'm not. Well, here's what we're doing. And, and then I would talk up like, so how's your day going? And they would just happen to be like, oh, it's going good. I'm annoyed about this. My kid did this, or work's been stressful. And then I would connect with them on those things. And before you know it, you have a start to a relationship, which might turn into a friendship, might turn into just, more of what's the word I'm looking for? An acquaintance type scenario. But
Yeah,
ultimately,
exactly. You just want to be around these people. And this is what I always say, take the pressure off yourself by thinking that your first email has to result in the project. Instead, focus on the person, and just like your first goal is to get a reply back or just to get a coffee.
Yeah.
Then after that, the next step, the next step, the next step. So you were at Massive, you probably continued your good habits of reaching out, you've built a bunch of business, and then you made the momentous decision like, I think I can do this on my own, and talk to me a bit about this, because I'm really curious also personally, because I went through it, and I would love to hear from somebody who is kind of on a parallel path where we've left the safe harbor of having a big production company, and now we're on our own, like, just trying to get the jobs. And I want to hear a bit about this journey and how it's been, and how it's going.
Yeah. So yeah, I think you and I had a similar feeling. I loved the opportunity that I had working there. Everybody I worked with, I really, really loved. And I think that the relationship just kind of ran its course. I got to a point where, my role at Massive was very much I was there for almost a decade, was composing and business development. I basically was the director of business development, which is the same thing I was kind of doing at South, but just at an elevated level. And yeah, my focus was the same. I would constantly reach out. I was still doing, when I first started at Massive, doing all those calls, and bringing in a majority of the business into Los Angeles. And whether that was in advertising or the start of where we kind of ventured in more into sonic branding a couple of years ago, I was doing a lot of that outreach. And it just got to a point where I didn't want to work for anybody anymore. Like I think there was a moment in time where I was just like, you know what? And by the way, my wife, who works behind.
Figured that's the producer there.
She's our executive producer, and my partner. She was the executive producer. She ran production at Massive Music in Los Angeles, and we had just kind of had a back and forth about what do we want to do, and sort of aligning on what our future was going to look like. And we were just kind of like, we're bringing in the jobs. Like, I'm creative directing them. That was what I meant to say earlier. A couple years ago, I shifted into the creative director role. And it just sort of felt like, okay, well, we're doing a majority of the heavy lifting, and we both are feeling like it's time for us to kind of work for ourselves. Let's see what we can do. Let's take the risk. Yeah. And it was terrifying. I mean, I have 2 kids. We have a mortgage. We have expenses. And, once you leave that sort of massive, nest, that money funnel into your bank account just ceases to exist.
Yep.
And we just had that moment where we looked at each other and we were like, are we going to do this? And we said yes. And so we decided to jump. We gave them notice, and we left. And, for the most part, it was a pretty peaceful, leaving scenario. I mean, it's sort of like leaving family in a way, love those guys and wish them the best. But yeah, we opened up our studio. We built a studio in the backyard of our house because this is during the pandemic.
Mhm.
Um, but what was crazy, and if we talk about serendipity, like you were mentioning earlier on the call, like you get rewarded for life rewards you if you just put your best foot forward at different times. And it was really crazy because like that we our last Friday, the following week on Tuesday, we got a job from your boy at Dave and Goliath.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it
Dave
wasn't from
Einziger.
him. It wasn't from
Uh,
him, but
yeah.
everybody's told me like how close you guys are. That you guys are like almost brothers, you know. And
We're very close, but I don't think I think maybe I've done one job for David and Goliath. That's the tragedy of that thing, which is like I'm good friends with the president and founder of the damn
yeah,
agency, but yeah, he's a little bit too high to
yeah,
be involved with the, I'm like, oh god damn it. But
yeah,
anyway, but that's fantastic. I have a
yeah,
similar story by the way. When I started, how serendipitously or not, the
yeah,
first job appeared like
yeah.
a week
It's
after I left.
awesome. Yeah, it's crazy. So yeah. So out of at Dave and Goliath, we got a CAYA job on that Tuesday. And before we were bringing jobs, and those jobs would basically pay for the studio you were working at Massive Music, and
Yep.
pay for everybody's salaries. And now it became like, wow, the work we're bringing in, once we pay our composers, the rest was profit to us.
Yep.
And that became a motivating factor as well, that like, wow, we could really, we don't have to have as big of a piece of the pie, like as to make a gigantic company like Massive Run. We could get smaller pieces and be just as successful, if not more successful, and
Of course.
also dictate our own lives, dictate our own calendar. I don't have anybody telling me where I need to be.
Yep.
I'm motivating myself with my partner and wife. Um, so,
Which is
on
wonderful,
Thursday,
by the way. It's a great story. And, I was talking to Chris Koss this morning, who, he was head of production at Massive in Amsterdam. We're good friends. And I said, now that like Song Trader is buying up Song Zoo and Massive and all, they bought like 5 music production companies. Daniel had a good question in our forum, like, what does this mean for the business? I didn't even know they were like on a buying spree. But I asked Chris, because he's also running a kitchen kind of like ours. He has
yeah,
a partner and they're kind of, it's like a small restaurant, 10 tables, just
yeah,
like yours, just like mine. We know all the customers and we like it. But I'm like, dude, is it possible for us to even survive? Like, what's going to happen, And I wasn't asking out of fear because I'm not going to change my ways anyway. I will
yeah,
always be boutique. But I said, what do you think the future is for us? Will it actually be better for us because there's all these monoliths forming and people will just want to deal with Ben and Kiki
yeah.
or, Chris and Chef or me and my crew? Like what, how do you see things unfolding for freelance composers, for us music production companies?
I mean, I think freelance composers will always have a role because, you know, there's always going to be a need for custom music, in my opinion. And I think freelance composers will be fine. If you have a big, a huge business conglomerate like Song Trader, who's, I'm sure trying to work out big deals, overarching umbrella deals with all the huge brands, um, that might create a little bit of difficulty for, music studios like ours, where there might be a mandate that you have to use Song Trader companies.
Yep.
Um, just like, I just feel like maybe that'll affect the biggest brands, but there's also mid-level brands and smaller brands that aren't going to be affected by those things. So I think, just as like the restaurant business, pre-pandemic, like not everything's a gigantic, corporate owned chain, and they're succeeding. And I think it's going to be the same thing. That's my guess. It
Yeah.
might be worse than that. It's something to pay attention to for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I'm curious to see where it goes, but I think because this business is a relationship business, I feel like some of these conglomerates might get into the assembly line kind of a thing. This is what Chris said this morning. He said, well, imagine like you call like Massive or a Song Trader company and there's a switchboard. Like already it's screwed up for a creative director or a film director. He doesn't want to deal with like a corporation with 25 cubicles. He just
Right.
wants like to drink some wine in the backyard with Ben and then talk about the gig in the last half hour or whatever, or not
Yeah.
even. We talk about it tomorrow. So I'm hoping that will be the case. But before we're gonna launch into questions, and I just want to ask you: is there anything else you want to share, like before we go into questions about your journey, all the way from getting into the business to now running your own company? Whether it's like whatever comes to mind first to give our folks some strength, motivation, some wisdom, because they're coming at it mostly from a freelance composer perspective, and so I'm trying to read their mind because I was once in their shoes, and it's like, oh, there's so many musicians, oh, nobody's getting back to me, oh, what's the point? Like, you know what I mean? There's Naren is doing all the jobs.
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
But none of those
Well,
things are true, right? Like I talk to these people.
yeah. So I'd say through my learnings, fight through imposter syndrome. Everybody that I've met that's really talented in this business has the insecurity of feeling like they're not as great as they wish they were. Um, Two, connect with people. It's a people to people, person to person business. People connect with people. I don't connect with emails, and I guarantee if you're sending a bunch of music companies emails trying to get jobs, chances are there's somebody calling me on the phone that's ahead of you. So just, always think about how can I best portray myself? When I'm dealing, for example, with business, if I have to talk about a budget, if we're working on a project and the budget, we're being taken advantage of by the agency, I never write an email about budget. I will get on the phone and call whoever I'm dealing with it, because we're able to connect spiritually and actually talk about things. They can get my sentiment of what I'm trying to convey. So, in a lot of times they'll come through for you. Whereas if I'm just like, well, this money isn't right, and we're now, losing money, they might be offended by how that's interpreted.
Yep.
So, there are very few people I think come across as human through email. Some people are really great at it and have a really amazing speaking voice when they write out emails. But for the most part, I would recommend calling. Interrupt somebody's day and make their day a little better. Express why you're so excited about what you're doing. Bring that excitement to them so that they feel excited about their day. And then ultimately, don't take no as an answer, and keep working. Keep working.
I like that. I'm gonna start picking up the phone, man.
Like, do you know how many people rarely would composers come by and visit? Even when we were at Massive, would come by and just come hang out. Coming by with a bottle of wine and just saying, "Hey, I just wanted to say thank you for bringing me projects." Like that immediately, just like that human element, that human connection, whether they brought something or not, just to come see me in person,
Yeah.
really meant something. And I think it means something to people.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
you know what, man? Something just occurred to me. We are people who are fascinated by sound and everything that sound can do to move human beings. And we know it's all chemical. I mean, really, it's a big mystery. It's magical. And like, why aren't we using our voice literally?
totally.
Instead, we're like
Instead of sound.
in Times New Roman,
Yeah.
turning ourselves into a font instead of the human being that we are. That's amazing, Ben. If you have a few minutes to answer some questions, folks, please raise your hand, ask some questions, make a connection with Ben right here.
I find myself that I don't know if I have the brain muscles, and I don't know if I'm business savvy enough, so to speak, to do that. I don't know if I ever will. I know that I will try my best to make music all the time. That's what I do, actually. So the question is, do you think it's absolutely necessary to come into your own, if you will, or you can make a comfortable living for you and your family just composing music, not worrying too much about running a business like you guys, like Tommy does, like Ben, I know you do too, because that seems like I don't know, like a tall order. Sometimes I think about it.
I think it comes natural to the decision. The evolution will happen if you get to a moment where you're like, I'm not happy working for another company. I feel like that becomes motivation for a change. And if you're, everybody has their own comfortability levels, like could I have done this? Could I have jumped ship 4 years ago? Possibly. But I waited almost 10 years of working at Massive before I felt ready. And it was just because, just like any other relationship when it runs its course, if somebody's breaking up with a girlfriend or saying like you're not the right friend anymore, or you meet somebody new, like you get these sort of inclinations that tell you what your next move should be, because that's sort of the evolution of how you're feeling, right? So I think regardless of whether you start your own company or you stay working for a larger company, you can still jump outside of your shell to connect with more people. So if your focus is on music, like why not call different creative directors that are working for agencies that you could be like, hey, I saw this spot that you did. I love the music you did. Sometimes I would do that, where I would call and I would just compliment them on a competitor's music, where I'm like, wow, what you did was so cool. And I'd be like, could we meet up for a coffee? Just to find, it's like finding more bandmates, right? Like everybody that I meet with that I end up collaborating with, whether they're a creative director or a producer or an art director, they just become a larger part of my band that I can potentially collaborate with. Yeah. And so I think if you focus on it like that versus creating this sort of bigger idea of jumping ship and having to be in charge of the financials and having to worry about salary and all this stuff, maybe that's your next step, is to just focus on building your creative band within, advertising or brands or film or whatever it is.
And Pedro, keep in mind that we are running a music production company, but you as a freelance composer, you need not think about some big business. Or to you as a freelance composer, and you're fine, man. You got the personality, you're funny, you're quirky. I can tell that's your personality. You're capable as a musical craftsperson. That's all you need. Like, don't think about business. All you would need to do is essentially just be yourself and develop that, that vibe with music.
Thanks, Tommy. I mean, I appreciate it all. My worry comes from this, because relationships do run its course, right? It has happened to me many times. The thing is that I'm kind of afraid that if I don't generate sort of a hub in which I can go get relationships through the thing that I'm spearheading, so to speak, it will become harder as I age. And if I didn't maybe create my own thing, maybe when I'm, 40, 50, I won't be able to do this because I'm not as youthful, not as fresh, and maybe not as, I'm not so much a novelty, so to speak. That's my worry. Yeah. As of now, I'm very happy to just worry about the music. Very, very happy about that only. I don't know. I'm thinking about the longevity of it all in a way.
Well, if you're, concerned, I mean, it sounds like a lot of fears that you're concerned about that are kind of, dictating your route forward, which I completely understand, because everybody has fears and similar fears, I'm sure. But just like, Tommy, and Tommy has a studio, and so you're a freelance composer?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
And you made the relationship with Tommy. You can make relationships with people like me and other studios and other companies. So, a lot of the successful freelance composers, like somebody like Naren, for example, probably has 30 companies hitting him up for demos. He probably has to he's turned me down at times.
Yep.
And it's like, just making demo fees can pay a significant salary. So, he's so busy, and most of the really popular cats in our business that are doing really well make those connections, make them with me, make them with Tommy, make them with, XYZ music company,
It's
right.
Like, how do you, but it's, Ben, I love the fact that you're saying you went to Kinko's, develop relationship with the flyer guy, went to the venue, develop a relationship. I mean, it doesn't matter what the hell you do, man. If you're a dentist, doctor, plumber, if you wrote letters, love letters, handwritten notes to people every day, you know what the power is? I'll tell you guys what the power is of contacting people. When I first got into business, I didn't have jobs. So like Ben, I had a script. I actually used to print off and said this story before. People in our music production company, like other people, experienced producers, had pitches and jobs. So they had these like PDFs with briefs with like the logos on top. So I'd print them off and I would carry them with me. I'd go to a bar where a lot of ad people were hanging out, and I'd put them on the desk beside my pint. And I was just pretending in the beginning to be successful, you know. But I was reaching out to 50 people a day. And what happened eventually is that I got to know a lot of people in the business in Toronto. And what happened before I even started getting jobs is I was already reaping the benefits of the network, because I knew that Sean is unhappy at Saatchi, and I knew that Ben is a creative director at Leo Burnett looking for an art director. And I was like, oh, you guys should meet. And because I was the common denominator, I knew both, and I had the perspective that they would vibe. Sure. You know, those things, like, that's the power of having a big band, as Ben called it. Like, the bigger your band gets, the more opportunities you see to help other people by connecting them. And then you're the king, and then people think of you, or queen, and people think of you when a job comes up.
Totally.
Yeah, man.
Another thing I wanted to add on to that, you know, you'd asked about when I jumped ship. One of the things I noticed that when we jumped ship, those relationships, like the relationships you made with your bigger, larger band, when we jumped ship and I called a few people to let them know I was doing this and they were all really excited, a lot of people that I'd met that were more acquaintances had like heard, like, we got a Nike job the next week after we'd started out of AKQA. And it was through a producer that I knew. I didn't know that well, but I knew him. We'd gone to lunches a few times, but a music producer from another agency knew about our company and recommended. He asked our friend who's a music producer, do you recommend any music companies that could do this task? And he's like, yeah, well, reach out to Ben at CAYA. They just started it. And so he hit me up, and it was an awarded job. And it's like, that has just completely continued to tumbleweed down with projects since we started. Like, it's you know, it's like those friendships and those contacts that they take a personal investment in you, but you also have to make a personal investment in them. And that, like, you out of the kindness of your heart connected two creative minds together. And I'm sure they're forever grateful. And when they think of music, they're like, oh, Tommy, let's hit him up, you know?
Well, I got to tell you, man, when I first got into business, it wasn't kindness of my heart. I was really cunning, and I knew this would be to my advantage to connect the people. But no matter how you look at it,
yeah,
when you help others, and even though it might be self-interested, but you do it skillfully, whereas you don't let your self-interest lead the conversation, but instead, I mean, it's like physics, man. It's like gravity. You do something nice for somebody else, you plant a space in their mind. Like, it's just going to be there. So you need not even say anything. People will. And if they don't, well, that's fine also. I mean, you're not going to beat jobs out of anybody. So,
Ben, I'd like to ask you, have you ever done any music, custom music for other industry other than the advertisement and brands? For example, movies, even if it's small budget movie, independent movie, or video games. The reason I'm asking is because I've been pitching my music and getting in touch with people, not only to the music for brands industry, even though Tommy is our mentor for the music for brands industry. Honestly, I don't care what I'm going to make music for, you know? I've been making music, for example, for marrying couples here in my hometown, because I play in where I do. I'm a wedding singer as well.
Awesome.
So I kind of started offering couples, oh, do you want me to compose a song about your life, about the way you met each other? So I started doing that. So I really don't care what I'm making music for.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if that's kind of a lack of focus when we are trying to get a first shot in the business, you know?
I think that's a really good question. So to answer your first question about did I do any work for films or video games? The answer is a little bit. So, and this is like a two-prong answer. So I tried to get into the film industry. And what I learned is if my focus was really divided, I wasn't getting much accomplished. So I noticed that, like, you know, when I'd mentioned earlier that I went to Warner Brothers and I got, you know, a track in Beverly Hills Chihuahua 2, which we composed like some organ sort of track that they needed, and the budget wasn't like huge or anything, but it was a decent budget. But like I realized like my focus divided with advertising, and I tried to get into film. I tried to get into the trailer world, and I just noticed that like I was chopping down trees in too many places, and I wasn't accomplishing much in any of the three. So I just literally moved my focus to brands and ads. That became, in a lot of ways, the best solution for me, because ads tend to be, for the most part, sprints, whereas films are like marathons. You know, they take a really long time. You have a huge amount of people that are decision makers that have to approve the film, whether it's the director, whether it's the music department, whether it's the studio. So what I learned was like ads, you know, I could end up bringing in a big job that had a good budget and a fun creative, and it can be done in a week or 2 weeks, and you're finished, and then you're on to the next thing. So not to say it's not possible, but I commend you on finding your own pathway, because you're exercising your brain, writing these songs with and you're challenging your mind, writing these songs for people, for couples. And I'm sure there aren't a lot of people doing that, you know what I mean? And maybe that could become a business of its own globally if you reach enough people that you know, people start doing that, you know. So I commend you on that. I would say the division of focus though should be considered, because you want to make sure you're focused. Otherwise, you know, you might end up with scraps from all the different sort of quadrants you're focusing in.
Cool.
And with my business, I know there's elements of my business that I could hire different people, and we might do that in the future. Like, you know, some people, their sole focus is representing sync and representing different catalogs, you know, different record label catalogs. And I know from some of my friends that have done that at different music companies, they make a lot of money. Like a friend of mine told me that a catalog made the business over $500,000 in 1 year. And like, I'm not in that at all. But I just don't have the bandwidth to do that too. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I'm like sort of maximized with original composition and sonic branding.
I'm a fan of Mike's and Incubus since the start. And I would just, you ever collaborated with each other? I know he's been doing some soundtrack for movies.
Yeah.
Have you collaborated him with you on the advertisement and the other way around as well?
So I have a funny story about that. Yeah, I've collaborated with him on projects. I mean, he was a huge influence and inspiration. If you ever listen to my band, you'll hear like that I probably rip him off left and right. He's a way more efficient guitarist than I am, and a way more talented guitarist. I'm more of like a weird rhythm guitarist. I can do some kind of solo leads, but you know, he was jamming to like Steve Vai and Jimi Hendrix and Joe Satriani and Eric Johnson, you know, like is like a 7th grader, you know, he was like 12, just slamming. And but we've worked on music together. We have a few songs that we've worked on together. My second band, which was called Agent Sparks, he produced. He came in the studio and worked with us. I've gotten to play on stage with Incubus a few times, you know, and we opened for them at a few different shows. On that song Nowhere Fast, I played one of the guitars on the heavy riff part of that. So that was my experience with him. But here's a funny story. You know, Incubus has sold millions of records. I've had my brother compose on probably 10 different commercials, and he's won 0.
Yeah. 0.
It's a different art form, you know, like he's never won. He's never even been shortlisted when I've had him write for us. And he's a talented guy. So, you know, for those of you who are...
Yeah. But that's a crazy story, which is cool. I could see that. Yeah, I was reading his bio. I remember one time, your brother's. I was like, I didn't care about Incubus and 1 million copies sold. I mean, I was never into Incubus. Right. I was like more interested in his academic and his the entrepreneurship and the scientific thing. I was like, wow. Now that I know that your father was a doctor, your mom was an opera singer, I can see how both of you have these crazy brains, which is like you're able to hold business and the chaos of art in the same head and actually reconcile them for each other's benefit, the business and the art.
Totally. Totally. And you know, and I think having Mike sort of be the trailblazer for me was also helpful. Because, you know, I saw Mike, he had his band and they were very successful in Los Angeles, but he got a job as an intern at Interscope Records, and he didn't mention anything to anybody about Incubus while he was there. He was smart about it. He just let people, Mike's a whiz at relationships. He knows, you know, he has multiple businesses now, and he's very much a people person. And, you know, by the time Incubus was like in a bidding war, that's when at the time Tom Wally, who was, you know, head of A&R at that time, found out about Incubus, and he was like, why didn't you tell me? And Mike was just kind of like, well, I didn't want to be that person that was selling myself to you. You know, it happened. He let it happen organically. And I think, you know, they liked him so much at that point. They didn't end up oddly going with Interscope, but Mike ended up doing collaborations with them at later points in his career. And, you know, he's constantly working with people. It's like he's just reaching out, and like we were talking about, growing that band. Like when he did the Avicii song, you know, and he's worked with Skrillex and like all these ideas. That Avicii song that he wrote with, he collaborated with him. What's the singer's name? No, I'm forgetting his name. That saying, "Wake me up when it's all over."
Oh yeah.
But anyway, we can find it offline. But anyway, you know, that song started out with just Mike and Avicii in a room. They wrote it in like 2 hours, and then Avicii had a session, another session with the singer who ended up singing on it, and Mike was like, let's just take that song and have him work with and have him sing over what we just wrote. Yeah. And that was it. They finished that song in like 4 hours, and it became like a global, gigantic track, you know?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And what you said about cold calling people for 4 hours a day is like, sounds like one of my worst nightmares. That's a lot. I can only appreciate that so much. Even right now, I have like, you know, I sent email and I was in touch with a couple of people that I wanted to connect with, and then they replied and they sent another email and they didn't reply, and I'm like, okay, they're busy. So I sent another one. Obviously, I'm talking about 3 weeks at least. I don't ever ask people like that, and they still haven't replied. So I'm clearly thinking like, oh man, just this guy clearly don't want to talk. So how do you get past that thing? Because it might be that they don't want to talk. Might even just be that they're busy and they forgot.
A lot of the time, I feel like, sorry, our gardener is here, and is it so loud in the background?
It's really loud. Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me though?
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
All right, cool. So, you know, a lot of times it's not that they don't want to talk to you. It's like they might have 20 emails that they have to attend to, and that they're already underwater, and then they see your email and they're like, I don't know who he is, and I'm just going to skip. In my opinion, you have to make yourself known, you know, like, and I think you have to interrupt their day in a way that's going to enlighten their day. Enlighten them to know you. You seem like a really likable guy with a great energy, you know, like if I was buried underwater and super busy and you called me, I might be like, hey, can you call me tomorrow? Or if you can get me on the phone and I'm like, and I have free time, or you keep me on the phone, like I might want to hear what you have to say, and then all of a sudden now you've made it onto my to-do list of, oh, I want to work with him. Let's figure this out.
I wanted to ask you just another thing. So I've been doing some production music lately, and you mentioned about not wanting to work for other people and that kind of stuff, and that. I had been thinking for a while of maybe opening my own like production music library kind of thing, and if anything, having not only with my catalog but having also other composers working for me. But it's my biggest fear is that I'm gonna end up doing a lot of work that is not strictly music related, and I really don't want to do that. And so, how was your experience in that? Did you still have time to write, or these days you find yourself mostly?
So that's a really good question. Wow, this is really loud. I think
he doesn't like me, for instance.
By the way, somebody found out that it was Aloe Black who was the singer.
Okay.
Yes.
Great singer. So because my role has always been a hybrid role, I really enjoy the business development. I love building relationships. I was never a composer that was a jack of all trades. I wasn't really great at orchestral music. I wasn't really great at like electronic music. So briefs for me, I had my limitations. And sure, could I have been the person that like learns and gotten better and perfected? Sure, but that would again would have divided like what I was doing. Yeah. For me, I think I spend about 70% of my time business development, making relationships, 30% on music. And that ends up working out for me because my skill set is only meant for probably 30% of the projects that come in here. And when they do come in here, if it's something that I feel like I'll nail, I'll do, you know? And I don't miss it because, you know, I enjoy both. I really enjoy making something from nothing, whether it's a blank canvas turning into a song or making a relationship that all of a sudden turns into a project.
Yeah.
Do you think that realistically speaking, there is a way to switch those percentage around and have a business?
I think maybe, I think, no. I think you have to, I don't think you can focus only on music and then like 20 or 30% on business development. I think you'd have to have somebody, a partner that you would do that with that would end up, I mean, it just depends on what you need to succeed too, you know? So if you're focused on 20%, you know, of business development, you're going to have a lot of dry spells, you know, you might get one job and then you're going to be like, what am I doing for the next 3 months? Can I survive on that one job? But, you know, always having business development, you know, is huge, you know, like getting, for example, you're talking about production libraries. One of the reasons why I stopped working in the trailer business is a friend that I met through the business. He owns a trailer company, music, where he basically would go overseas and have orchestras, you know, build out his scores that he created on MIDI keyboard. And then he would create at the time, CDs that would go to all the editors, right? Because the editors ultimately choose what trailer music they're going to use. Yeah. And he used to be an editor and he worked for like 7 different companies. So of course, who are they going to listen to? Me or him? He's going to get the top of the you know, priority. And so having those relationships, and there's always going to be somebody that's going to have an inside track. And, you know, you want that inside track to be you know, like, and so business development is crucial for that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Thank you so much.
As uncomfortable as it might feel, honestly, you feel a lot better when you do the difficult thing. And Naran, to me, for instance, is an example of a guy who he's not built like you, Ben. I mean, as far as like the outgoing, like the making the relationships happen, like, you know, he really isn't, but he's managed to like do the difficult task of like making 30 different music production companies his friend. And now he doesn't have to do it anymore. Like, I don't think he would ever send an email these days, or for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Well, maybe last 5 years, he probably sends 0 emails now asking for work.
Totally. But he's a people person too, though. You know, like when I have a brief and Narn has a question, he doesn't. Some composers just email me, and he calls me. Like he'll want to call and chat, and then we end up talking about like how he did this in life and what he's doing next week. You know, like chat. You know, like he's.
Do you find it just as effective to like offer like, can we get together on Zoom or call? Like, you know, do you find that to be just as useful? And because I find that part of like the getting to know somebody is actually seeing them and like sitting with them, like that energy is always preferable for me. But you know, we are in the 2021. So I was kind of curious, how do you react? And then one last thing to piggyback on that, with that, if I'm trying to reach out to you to speak to you, should I also, because like you said, people ask you at what point do you slip in the job part, but is it important, like, should I just have my like website and my signature, or should it be part of the initial email when I want to reach out to you saying like, well, here's some stuff that I've also worked on anyway, if you want to check it out, you know, or do you do
I think it's okay to show. Yeah, I think rather than going, hi, my name is so and so. You know, my name's David. Here's what I've done. I'd love to work with you. Like, I think if you say, you know, my name's David. You know, would love to meet you. I'm a composer. You know, if you have 10 minutes of your time to just chat. Would love to connect. And a good in all the time is to compliment who you're talking to on their work, right? Like, don't go in not knowing about who you're talking to. You know, every time I would reach out blindly to anybody, I would see what work they did first. And sometimes it doesn't, you know, it's like a waste of time in a way because, or it felt like a waste of time, even though it wasn't, because I couldn't get in touch with them. It was like another step. But like, so if you called me and you were like, Ben, man, I really love that work you did on the Taco Bell taco gifter spot. I thought that was awesome. Whatever it is, that immediately makes me go, oh, he cared enough to not just want to take from me. He like was interested in what I'm doing. So that's a really important part of it too. And then you say, you know, here's some stuff I did. If you feel like checking it out, I think that's a really like non-invasive way to get somebody to be interested. And then say, if you have time this week or next week, you know, let me know. Cheers, David. You know, like, I feel like that is a very non-invasive. I get your personality. I can tell, like, you respect the fact that I might be busy. You respect the fact that, you know, you're looking to collaborate and you're looking to get to know me too. So I think all of those, you kind of check all the boxes, you know, that would make me be like, all right, yeah, I'll check this guy out.
Thank you.
Did that answer all your questions?
Yeah, I mean, it was also like the media.
Yeah, the media, right. So you know, since the pandemic, obviously that created a challenge because people couldn't meet in person. And that creates a bigger challenge in terms of connecting, because now people weren't working at an advertising agency. You're getting people like while they're home with their kids on cell phones. But that's now starting to change a little bit. So I think connecting just on phone is really important. Like, I didn't email any contacts when we started our business here. When we started CAYA, I called everybody, or I FaceTimed, or I text messaged and said, hey, do you have time to chat? And and these were people I knew or acquaintances, but I would have little FaceTime meetings with people in my backyard and talk to them for a half hour about their life, and then be like, so I started this company, I'm really excited about it, I wanted to tell you about it. And for the most part, you know, per Tommy Z's scenario, it's like, out of like, you know, 10 people, 8 people brought us jobs, or 7 people brought us jobs, you know, and like, you just keep rolling that out. And the people that didn't give you jobs, you just keep in touch with them. Maybe they didn't have a job at the time, or maybe they had another company they promised, but you just keep it going. Eventually you'll get it, you know?
Yeah. That's awesome.
CAYA, like, what was the inspiration? Where's the name from?
So CAYA stands for Come As You Are. My wife and I, one of our favorite bands is Nirvana. But you know, the message of coming as you are, to come as you are, felt really important just in today, to be allowed to be who you are and who you want to be. And that felt really sort of in sync with our belief system, and you know, how that connects to what we do work-wise is we encourage our clients to come as you are, and we will help tell your story through music and sound. So that's CAYA.
Yeah, that's cool.
I thought it was like a Greek word. Maybe it is. I don't know, but that's awesome. I like that explanation too.
Yeah, I was also wondering what the root of that was, and it's a cool story.
Yeah, we don't ever say like, oh, this is Ben from Come As You Are, but you know, when people sort of dive into what the letters stand for, that's the meaning behind it.
That's
so it just
really cool.
created a cool word, I guess.
That's really cool. Your advice is very motivating, not just to me, but I think to everybody, because it just shows you, man, like you know, you just got to get down and do the difficult thing, and the difficult thing becomes easier, and then actually everything in your life and work improves if you just allow yourself to like go through with the difficult things. And picking up the phone, you know, man, in this age, like, of interconnectedness and Zoom, just that advice alone, I feel like, you know, I mean, I'm just going to become more aware of it myself also, because I'm realizing I'm kind of comfortable that way, sending off these emails, you know. I'm definitely not going to email you again. I'm going to call you next time.
I hope you do. But I've always felt like you had that sort of very spiritual side of connection. Like, I remember when I met you the first time when I walked into the Amsterdam office, and I was like, man, this guy's a great, interesting human being. I just felt like you had wisdom that I could learn from you, you know? And it was in a very, like, it just felt very organic and natural. And I think everybody that's, talked to me that we've spoken to in this Zoom call all seem really lovely, like if I talked to any of you and you called me, I would enjoy that phone call. So, don't be afraid of, well, that's bad advice. If you are afraid, fight through it, and show yourself.
We are all afraid, but my wife said to me before she was my wife, when she actually made a decision that we were going to be together, and it wasn't an easy decision because I was still in Canada. She was living in Poland, and I met her here, but I had my life in Canada, and we had to make a decision, like, what are we going to do? And she took some time to think about it. And she said to me, I heard in one of my lectures, because she was taking some lectures at the time, that the opposite of love is not hate, but it is fear. Very interesting. When you allow fear to direct your decisions, you're playing a very bad game, like to yourself, actually. It's not meant to be that way in your life.
Yeah. What cool things come from swimming in the shallow end? Really? What cool experiences come from like being in knee-deep water?
Yeah. But do make sure that you check if the pool has water before you dive in.
Exactly.
And that's wisdom we're going to leave you with for today. Ben, really cool, man. Really appreciate it. I'm not going to send you an email. I'll send you an email to thank you for this after the call, but I will connect with you over the phone. This has been amazing, and I'd love to chat with you some more, just about life and business. So we'll do that. But I want to thank you very much for being here, for lending your time to inspire these folks. I am absolutely sure that it will make a difference in their journey.
Well, thank you for having me, and it was great to meet everybody. And best of luck with your career making music and whatever routes you choose to do with that. And I'm always around. Anybody ever wants to talk to me, hit me up.
Be careful what you wish for. Your phone's going to be off the hook now. You'd be like, you know what? I got a new thing now. It's email me. No problem.
Well, I think a good route is, I'll always be honest if I'm too busy to talk at a moment, but I always love meeting new talented musicians. I never forget where I came from, and I was in the same position as a majority of the people in this room. So I appreciate the hunger and excitement.
Right on, man. All the best to you. Hope you get lots of jobs, win all the pitches, and big hugs from all of us to your wife. Also, we haven't met her here, but just pass on my best wishes, and wishing you guys the best. And I'll connect with you sometime after this call.
Good, brother.
Have a great evening, everybody. Have a great day, Ben. All the best. Take care, guys. Ciao.